St. Mark's Church in the Bowery is tucked away in Manhattan's Lower East Side, a pillar of spiritual propriety standing tall in the scurrying capitalism of modern Manhattan. The church is active within the community, fostering programs that tend to the welfare of its neighborhood and parish. St. Mark's still manages, in its serene austerity, to stand apart from the hectic bustle of the Big Apple, and it's old, very old, celebrating its 200th year in 1999. The Episcopal Church, with its regal architecture, flourishing art scenes, and faithful congregation, is more than an eminent place of worship. It is also one of New York City's oldest historical landmarks. Since 1799, the church has operated from within the thriving city's heart, serving as an administrative center for philanthropic projects as New York surged through one growing pain after another. At different times over the years, St. Mark's has provided schooling for underprivileged children, served as a meeting place for humanitarian societies, and in the 20th century has been a respectful venue for local drama, all the while providing its Sunday services to New Yorkers. But the church's roots run deeper yet into the city's foundations, stretching back to a time when New York was New Amsterdam, the Lower East Side was open farmland, and most of the city's inhabitants spoke Dutch. It was 1660 when New York's first governor, Peter Stuyvesant, built a Dutch Reformed chapel on the site where St. Mark's stands today. Stuyvesant owned the surrounding land, the sprawling plantation, or Bowery in Dutch, located just north of New Amsterdam. Stuyvesant was a haughty Dutch aristocrat whose drive to achieve worldly wealth overshadowed every other aspect of his character. Many of his contemporaries would probably say that his physical appearance reflected something of his personal priorities. Dressed resplendently in 17th century Dutch finery, Stuyvesant went about his daily business on the colony, lurching through the streets of New Amsterdam with a cruel fire burning beneath his hard eyes and a hideously misshapen gait. He lost one leg while serving in the military years before, and his wooden peg leg, ostentatiously studded with silver bands, thumped and scraped across the ground wherever he went. The difficult Dutch patriarch ruled the area with a vicious arrogance, so that when the New Englanders of Long Island moved in to occupy New Amsterdam in 1664, the residents welcomed a change in leadership, and not a single shot was fired in defense. Stuyvesant stayed on in the colony after he was deposed, entrenching himself in the opulence of his plantation for 8 more years, until death claimed him in 1672. He was buried underneath his chapel within the vault he requested for his own remains, the first of a long line of Stuyvesants who would be entombed in these catacombs. Though the chapel was eventually torn down, with St. Mark's being erected in its place in 1799, the Stuyvesant vaults remained intact, and members of the Dutch clan continued to be buried there until the 1950s, when the catacombs were finally sealed. Today, it is estimated that there are about 70 coffins laid underneath St. Mark's, saying nothing of the bodies buried in the nearby cemetery that is currently looked after by the Episcopal Church. Today, St. Mark's in the Bowery is something of a Janus of the Manhattan cityscape. On the one hand, the church has taken a progressive, proactive stance in the community. Buoyed by a social activism that left its mark on the local clergy in the 1960s, St. Mark's has become deeply involved in local arts while sponsoring numerous programs aimed to improve the urban quality of life. On the other hand, St. Mark's stands amid one of the oldest burial grounds in New York City. Ever since Peter Stuyvesant was buried there in 1672, corpses have been slowly gathering over the years, and a large cemetery has grown around the church. Like the vaults under St. Mark's, the burial plots in the cemetery are catacombs, large subterranean rooms marked by stone slabs above ground. For those visitors inclined to imagine it, the idea of these underground caverns yawning just underneath the city has cast St. Mark's in a darker, more mysterious shade. So it is that as the parish works to foster and celebrate urban life, others perceive the church itself as a monument to the dead, and not an entirely inert monument either. Many of those who have experienced the darker side of St. Mark's have walked away with an acute realization that not all the dead lie still or are irretrievably banished to the past, that some residents of the underworld are intent on remaining in the land of the living. Given Peter Stuyvesant's obsession with worldly interests, his practically religious pursuit of money, power, and prestige, can it be any surprise that his soul is determined to remain on the lands he claimed as his own so many years ago? For it is the spirit of New York's first governor that everyone thinks of whenever another bizarre event transpires at St. Mark's, and not without good reason. In fact, people around the church have been having bizarre encounters with Stuyvesant for over 2 centuries now, beginning shortly after the former Dutch aristocrat passed on. More than one housemaid ran screaming from Stuyvesant's property in the middle of the night, crying out that their master has come back from the dead. One popularized account has a sexton who was looking after St. Mark's during the Civil War woken from his sleep by a measured thudding noise in the hall. The sound continued as the man lay in bed, drawing nearer in a slow cadence until the nocturnal visitors seemed mere yards from the sexton's door. Trembling in fear, the church's steward got up and opened the portal, only to find a deserted hallway. On another evening, shortly after, the caretaker heard the wooden clunking again, but this time, when he stepped out of his room to investigate, his eyes corroborated what his ears had heard. Though he was anything but happy about it, lumbering down the hall toward him was none other than Peter Stuyvesant, moving as quickly as he could in an awkward, peg-leg locomotion. The sexton reeled back in horror, staring at what may as well have been Stuyvesant's statue come to life. Fleeing from St. Mark's that night, he never returned to the church again. Others have reported strange sounds coming from the church during the evening hours. For a while in the late 1800s, the bells of St. Mark's acquired an eerie tendency to ring on their own. The bells would suddenly start chiming in the middle of the night, waking everyone in the surrounding neighborhood. More than once people got up to investigate, but no one was ever found in the church during these forays, even though the bells would still be swaying by the time local residents got to the tower. While people's experience in the church have not been as dramatic in recent years, strange occurrences have been consistently reported. Almost invariably, these events take place after the sun has set on Manhattan. Pedestrians passing by the churchyard at night have heard that peg-legged gait, which can only be attributed to Peter Stuyvesant. Others have seen faint outlines moving through the darkness of the cemetery, while some swear that a shadow emerged from the darkness of the churchyard, a silhouette somehow darker than the blackness around it, before fading back into the nothingness it came from. And then there are the accounts of the whispering, labored breathing, and of course the same thud, thud, thud that has been heard by more than one petrified passerby through the course of New York's history. By these accounts, it seems all too apparent that Peter Stuyvesant, in one form or another, continues to inhabit Manhattan. The city today would be completely unrecognizable to the statesmen who governed New Amsterdam in the 17th century, but the avaricious Dutchman would hardly be put off by the impressive dimensions of New York today, and perhaps the spirit of Stuyvesant, enthralled by the magnificent wealth of Manhattan, feels more at home in New York today than he ever did when he ruled over it.